There we go. It's like,
Perfect.
all right, how do I do a PowerPoint and record at the same time? Figure it out. All right. So miscommunication, power struggle, negativity, difference of opinion, violence, disagreement, difficult, anger, tension, retaliation, ooh, arguing, friction. Do we have any more coming in here? We've got 14 answers. We've got 30 some odd folk. So I'm going to give you all another minute or two. We can see here on the bottom this little icon that looks like a circle and a circle and shoulders. Tells us we've got 14 different responses or 14 different individuals who have contributed. So give you all another minute. If you have any other words that when you think about conflict, it's part of what comes up.
And if anybody is having trouble accessing the Mentimeter, you can just drop it in the chat and I can read those out as well. So you can always use the chat box as well if you feel comfortable.
Very good. All right. So in reality, or, you know, in the reality called the dictionary, there are, we got a few more here. Contradictory goals. Thank you guys for participating. And politics. Those are new ones. So negativity, negative, argument, difficult, arguing, difference of opinion, power struggle, violence, friction, miscommunication, tension, retaliation, struggle, negative, disagreement, perspective. Thank you. So when we look, now we've got 18, that's significantly more perspectives that are coming in here, which is awesome. Because that's part of when we think about conflict, part of the reality is that it's different perspectives that are coming in that often end up in this one lane road and clash of ideas and disagreement and tension and friction and misunderstanding. Sometimes it's around politics. And it often makes us end up not feeling good. And, you know, so we're really looking at how do we manage ourselves and manage other people in the face of these dynamics. And so I went to our friend, the Google, to see what really the definition is of conflict. Bless you. And, you know, really, it's about this idea of a disagreement, an argument, typically a protracted one. So one that just kind of hangs on, which is part of how it gets this feeling of so much negativity. It's a clash of ideas. And the reality is that in this situation, what we're looking at are emotions. And I love the movie Inside Out. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's super fun, you know, but these are the most basic emotions that we all have. The thing that is tricky about emotions is that many of us have never really been taught how to constructively manage our emotions. And I don't know about y'all, but we had this idea when I was coming up in the world of work that we were sort of one person at home and then a totally other person at work. And that the person at work, like, checked their emotions at the door. What we've realized in the last 20 or 30 years, really with the advances in neurobiology, so that we can understand what's going on in the human brain when people are still alive. The reality is that unlike what we really want to believe, that humans are thinking beings that sometimes have feelings, the reality is that we are feeling beings that sometimes think. And so like you can't actually take action unless you have a feeling about it first, that you want to get into action around this thing, that that you need to get into action around this thing. And when we think about how we've been taught to manage our emotions, often it's in these kind of two different modalities. Either we suppress them, so we might eat our feelings, we might shop our feelings, we might stuff our feelings, or we sort of spill them out all over the place, and sometimes in not really a very healthy way. It's often called flooding. We can flood ourselves, we can flood other people with the emotions that we're having. And there's costs to both of those. When we suppress our emotions, when we don't feel our emotions, our cost is our health. And the reality is that when we look at what's happened over the last 2.5 years during the COVID pandemic, we aren't doing great with our mental health because we've been often suppressing our feelings. There's been so much that everyone has been trying to deal with. It's having a huge cost on both our physical and our mental health. The reverse, when we spill our emotions onto other people, the cost is often our reputation. If we are exploding all over the place, we get a reputation. Or if we are exploding into certain people, it's relationships. And sometimes what we do is we have a situation at work and then we go home and we spill onto our families, we spill onto our partners, we spill onto our friends. And that can have a real cost in those relationships if we're spilling and not really processing what's going on well. So there is a third way, which is essentially about riding the wave. And I love this quote, that feelings are like waves. They just come. We don't have an ability to actually control our feelings. What we can do is choose which feelings we're going to surf, which feelings we're going to express, which feelings we're going to explore, and which ones we're going to let just sort of roll through. So I don't know about y'all, but when I was a little kid, I remember having some diagram that looked kind of like this. Because when we're kids, or when we have kids and we're helping them manage big emotions, this is usually how we talk about it. Because kids have big emotions and they're just little people. They don't know how to manage their big emotions. And so we help them with remembering it's never okay to hurt anybody else. We want to take a deep breath. We want to use our words. How often do we say that to little kids? You want to use your words. We want to ask for help. And we want to take time to calm down. The reality is that as effective as this is when we're 3, is as effective as it is when we're 33 or 43 or 53 or 63. These are actually the tools that work regardless of our age and our place in life. So we want to remember that even if we're having big emotions, the best thing that we can do is slow down, is calm down, is breathe, is use our words. Remember to ask for help and that it's not okay to hurt other people. So then how do we do all of that? I'm going to get to that in a second. And before I get to that, I want to get into a little bit about how do we prevent conflict in the first place. And as Elena said in the beginning, some level of conflict mean, we are human beings. Put two human beings in a room, they're going to have conflict at some point. And all conflict is not bad. It's a difference of opinion. It's a difference of perspective. And so then really it's about how do we manage that? How do we manage ourselves and how do we manage the situation? So the best way that I know to prevent negative conflict and to enhance positive conflict is through what's called psychological safety. Amy Edmondson is the queen of psychological safety at work. And she's a Harvard Business School professor who originally was studying what was happening in hospitals and in cases of critical care. And one of the things that she realized, and it makes sense, is that if psychological safety is present, if a nurse can raise her hand and say, "Excuse me, doctor, we have a problem here. You're about to operate on the wrong knee, or you just left something in there, or you didn't catch that little thing." That's when accidents are prevented. And often in situations, we've got the paradigm, and I don't know about y'all, but I have worked in many organizations that it felt like I was in a sort of constant state of psychological danger, where it was not okay to admit mistakes, where people got thrown under the bus. And the reality is that when we're living in that kind of a situation, we don't share our ideas about things. We are not willing to innovate. We're not willing to risk. And we get into common knowledge effect, which is essentially like, it's a combination of we've always done things that way and groupthink. So you can see how we've always done things that way and groupthink aren't going to create a situation where you've got a lot of innovation. On the other hand, when we go about the business of creating psychological safety, we know that human beings, part of the condition of being human is we make mistakes. And really it's about then, how do we recover from that? And if I'm afraid to make a mistake, I can't learn from it. And I can't even admit it when it happens. So when we create a culture in which we know human beings make mistakes, and what's important is that we own it and we learn from it, then everybody is going to share ideas and we're going to get better decision making and we're going to get more innovation. The reality is, in this kind of organization, and I had a friend say to me the other day, I used to think that psychological safety was like the base, like that's what you built on. I've realized that's the destination. That's where we're going. Because creating this kind of organization takes a lot of work. And the payoff is enormous. Organizations that are psychologically safe are 28% more profitable than organizations that aren't psychologically safe. Forget about organizations that have high psychological danger. So the benefits of creating a psychologically safe organization are huge, and it takes resources to get there. I'm going to pause for just a second and check in and see if there's any questions that are burning or anything that anybody would like to contribute yet. All righty, I'm going to keep moving on. And again, if things come up, please join in the conversation. Because right now it's pretty much a monologue, which is fine. So one of the biggest things in creating psychologically safe organizations, and in both preventing conflict and in managing through conflict, is listening. And we human beings have collapsed two different ideas. We have collapsed the idea of hearing with listening, and they are actually two very different things. So unless we have a hearing impairment, hearing just happens. It's one of our 5 senses. So you are hearing my voice, you are hearing me clap. We hear sounds. Listening is an intentional act. We get to pay attention when we are listening well. And listening then creates all of these different possibilities and opportunities and connections in an organization. So this is what listening actually does. It increases trust. And we humans have this idea that trust is like, it's a fixed thing. Like we have trust or we don't have trust. And if you break my trust, you're dead to me. That's not how trust works. We break and recreate trust all the time. I have a deal with my husband that if I am going to be later than 6 o'clock in getting home, I will let him know. I break that agreement all the time. I forget to let him know I'm like involved in something, or I'm on a call, or I'm doing something that has me excited, and I lose track of time and I don't let him know. In that moment, we have broken trust. I have broken trust with my husband. And so then I apologize. I call him when I realize what time it is. I say, I'm so sorry, honey. I'm still at the office. I think I'll be home in about 20 minutes. He has figured out that whatever I say, he has to double that time, because I'm a bad judge of how long it's going to take me to get out the door. And I only, my office is about 5 minutes from my house, so it's not going to take me very long to get home. So, but when we listen well, we increase trust. It motivates our people, it motivates our employees, it motivates our partners at work, it motivates our collaborators. It sets a good example, like this is how we listen here. It drives innovation and it helps us make better decisions. Often, however, when we're listening, most humans have 3 different ways of listening. What's the point? What's the problem? Or what does this have to do with me? Because the reality is we are all the center of our own universe. If you're the best friend in the movie that is your life, we have a different problem. So what does this have to do with me? Why are you telling me this? What's the point in this? Or what's the problem? How can I help? Is how we normally listen if we are listening well. Our opportunity instead is to listen to learn. To listen to learn what is important to you, and not what do I think about what you're saying. Because often when we listen, we're also listening through the lens of, you're doing it right now. You're listening to me and you're thinking, what do I think about what she's saying? Do I agree? Do I disagree? Instead of, what's important to this person? Or how can we create something different if there's some sort of conflict that you're looking to work your way through? In case you're thinking this doesn't have anything to do with you, 91% of employees think that their manager doesn't listen. We have an epidemic issue with listening. And just like anything else, when we first really start focusing on it, it can be a challenge. And so an easy way, you guys are all in the same organization, an easy way to sort of get started is to play with people a little bit around it and say, I'm practicing listening. And so I'm going to really listen intently. And then I'm going to tell you what I think I heard, because we often don't actually get everything that the other person is looking to impart to us. And so we can check in. Did I get it? were there important things that I missed? Like, yeah, there's always going to be nuances, but like, did I get everything that was important in there to you for me to understand? And we can have a back and forth and a conversation about it. So then when we find ourselves in conflict, what do? I love this model, which was created like 45 years ago, which is really looking at, as it says, it's a reflective learning cycle. So it's helping me understand what went down. And then it's also helping us pull it apart. So what happened? What were your feelings? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Sometimes what were you experiencing in your body? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second. What was good or bad about that? What was the opportunity to learn something? And if you're in conflict, you know, what's the opportunity here? What sense can we make of it? What are we thinking the elements were that went into this? Is there something that you could have done differently? Were there any other options that were available to you? And next time it happens, if it arises again, what could you do? And so sort of thinking through this cycle, I think, is a great way, you know, anytime we're debriefing something, which is also a way to increase trust and psychological safety, is when you have an organizational culture, when you debrief like this, you know, if you just debrief the bad stuff, then anytime you're going to debrief, everybody's like, oh crap, we got to do a debrief. But if you debrief everything, then it becomes normalized. And so, you know, our opportunity here, when we think about our brains, and this is, you know, a very rough schematic of our brains, up in the front, this is our prefrontal cortex. This is our thinking center. And we have our emotional center. And then way back down and up in there is our amygdala, our fight, flight, freeze, our survival center. Often when we are in conflict, what happens is we get triggered, and it literally throws us here into our survival center, into this fight, flight, freeze part of our brain. This part of our brain got developed before we had language. So if you've ever had the experience where something happens and you get so mad or frustrated or upset that you literally lose your words, that's part of what's happening. You've gotten thrown into your amygdala. If you ever are in a conversation with somebody over a meal and something happens and you get really upset or angry and you suddenly lose your appetite, you've gotten thrown into your amygdala. You've lost your appetite because things in our bodies literally start to shut down. Because if you think about it, you know, this part of our brain got created before language. So we were all out on the Serengeti. Something bad was happening, which probably meant our life was in danger. There's a tiger. And so we've got to run really, really fast. We don't need to digest food. So literally our digestive system shuts down. Our reproductive system shuts down because we don't need to make babies when we need to run really fast. And so it's this system that is in our brain in order to enable our body to move as fast as it possibly can to get out of the way of danger. So then what do we do if we get thrown into fight, flight, and freeze? And you can often tell, like, your body will tense up, and sometimes we feel it in particular parts of our body. We can feel this tension, this pressure. The first thing that we want to do is take a deep breath. It's back to that that graphic of the 5 fingers. You know, we want to breathe. We want to calm down. And literally taking a deep breath resets our brain. So if we are in fight, flight, and freeze, if we take a deep breath, physiologically what's happening is our brain realizes, oh, okay, I can't breathe that way. I can't take a deep breath when I'm running from a tiger. So whatever the problem is, it's actually not a fight, flight, freeze kind of situation. So when we take a deep breath, it resets our brain. We get out of our amygdala and back into our prefrontal cortex. That's why in all of the ancient traditions and all of the things around yoga and whatever, there's so much around breath, because it literally centers us and gets us to be able to think and feel. We can neither think nor feel when we are in our prefrontal cortex. We can only react. So then we want to listen. And we've talked a lot about listening already. The next thing we want to do is we want to really examine. And I love this, this picture, because obviously, if you've ever had a pet and taken them to the vet, usually when the vet is doing something like looking in their ears, the pet is trying to get away from it. Or if you've got kids and or even yourself, often we don't lean into this kind of activity. And this little kitty is just hanging out. He's willing to be with the examination. He's willing to be with, let's look at what's going on here so that we can figure out a solution. We often get very positional in these kinds of situations. We have my truth and we have your truth. Somebody put politics up on the word cloud that we made earlier. We are very polarized at this moment in time. Somebody else put the word perspective. And I loved that, because the reality is that, there's often this idea that there's, my truth and your truth and then the truth. I'm not entirely sure that that's really how it works. But there's definitely perspective that can be gathered. And so we've got these two, both look like rudimentary gentlemen here. One sees a 6 and one sees a 9. Both are totally legitimate. I totally understand why one sees a 6, and I totally understand why one sees a 9. So then how do we work through that? Part of how we work through that is by holding people as works in progress. We often have it that people are one way or another way. We often have it that, so Jim, I don't know, I'm not sure it's not an elephant. I saw a couple of people smiling and I was like, okay, somebody said something funny. I want to check out what's in the chat. It could be an elephant. It's entirely possible. Somebody could see that was an elephant. It's got a trunk. Yes.
Some time ago, Elena showed the group that I'm a part of the video about the blind men and the elephant, and it's the same point.
Correct. And so we want to really think about how are we getting our information, and how do we create a way through. And part of how we do that is we hold people not as fixed entities. There is a woman named Carol Dweck who came up with this idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset. And so when I have a fixed mindset, I say things like, I'm bad at math. I I try really hard, but I never get there. I have it that I am a particular way. And then what happens is that I avoid challenges. I give up easy. I get threatened by other people's success. I will do anything to look smart. Trying is pointless. Effort is futile. I ignore feedback. I have fixed abilities. And I'm going to ignore feedback because if I'm bad at math, you trying to help me through math, you trying to coach me on that isn't going to get me anywhere because I'm already bad at math. Versus if we have a growth mindset, if we have it that we are all works in progress. And yeah, there's things about math that I don't particularly enjoy. And I am married to a scientist. And, you know, so sometimes I give him math to do instead of me. But there's stuff about math, like I love figuring out puzzles. I love figuring out, I love Excel spreadsheets, and I love like figuring out how things are interrelated to each other. So there's things about math that and physics that I actually really enjoy. And so from that perspective, I am going to be somebody who is always going to persevere. I am going to try and acquire new skills. I'm going to be interested and be curious and embrace challenges. We can do this for ourselves. We can also do it for other people and situations. Because one of the things that often happens when we find ourselves in conflict is that we have the other person as a fixed being. Well, you know, they're just always this way, or they never listen to me, or they are always argumentative. Like it's what humans do. We put them into a box. And once we have them in that box as a fixed entity, it is very hard for them to break out of that. And it's hard for us to have them as anything other than how we've created them in our minds. Part of the key to all of this is self-awareness. And all of us have some level of dysmorphia about how we see ourselves. I love this little kitten seeing him or herself as a strong lion. And there's two different kinds of self-awareness. There's the self-awareness about, I understand what's going on inside myself. There's also the self-awareness, external self-awareness. So that's internal self-awareness. I understand what's happening inside me. External self-awareness is I understand how you perceive me. I understand how I show up in the world to other people. And unfortunately, there is an inverse relationship, back to math. There's an inverse relationship between how high we rise in an organization, our power, our perceived power, our own perception of our own power, and our understanding of how we show up to other people. So the higher we rise in an organization, statistically, the less aware we are of how we show up. If you think about it, you can kind of get it. Like, well, if I'm queen of the universe, I don't really give a crap what any of you think about me because I'm queen of the universe. So the more we hold ourselves as omnipotent, then the less interested we are in how we are showing up to other people. So as we're thinking about then, how do we navigate through this? One of the best ways that I know is with emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence got started back in the 1970s when people were really into self-help. And not that we're not still into self-help, but it was relegated to that world. Emotional intelligence was discovered when social scientists were trying to figure out, why is it that there's some folks, man, like on the IQ test, they are killing it. But in life, they're not really doing so good. And then there's this whole other group of folks like, doing okay on the IQ test, but they're killing it at life. They're having these amazing lives with all kinds of people in them. And is there another kind of intelligence at work? And they realized that there is. And they named it emotional intelligence. If I were actually queen of the universe, I would rename it, because I think having it be emotional intelligence has it be less important. And I had to take a deep breath before I said that, because I understand from a neuroscience perspective, emotions are actually what is driving our actions. And we in society, especially Western society, have it that emotions are often bad. They're like, girls have emotions, boys don't have emotions. I mean, we have all of these actually ridiculous ideas about emotions. And so I would rename it and name it something that was more neutral than emotional intelligence. But I'm not queen of the universe, so I don't get to do that. But essentially how this works, and I love it that there are these carrots that go from one to the other and then just continue around the circle. So self-perception, how I understand myself. Self-expression, how I express to you what's happening over here. Interpersonal, how I'm able to relate to you and how we're able to relate to each other. And that's where emotional intelligence stopped until about 20 years ago, when businesses realized even just this, understanding myself, expressing it well, and being able to build interpersonal relationships is important for the work world, because the reality is business gets done by humans. And so it got brought into the world of work. And then these last two pillars around decision-making and stress management got added. And when we think back to psychological safety, when we are doing these things well, we are creating psychological safety at work. Because if I can understand what's happening with me, express that in a healthy way, neither suppress it or flood it over to you, but manage it well, surf it well, then we are going to have a good interpersonal relationship. I can connect with you about what's really happening. And like if I'm the CEO and you're frontline staff, you are going to then know it is safe for you to tell me what's actually happening out there in the world dealing with customers, what the real challenges are that we're having, what you think the opportunities are, where the breakdowns are happening. And then we can actually make good decisions. If I'm not creating that safety, if I don't let you fully express yourself and am not able to create empathy and teamwork with you, which is what social responsibility is, it's really about teamwork, then you're not going to be able to tell me what's happening, and we're going to make bad decisions. And then we make good decisions, we make bad decisions, we have stress. So then how do we manage that stress? One of my favorite elements of this, and I'm a certified practitioner in emotional intelligence, one of my favorite ones for organizations is this idea around optimism. And when I first saw that, I was like, optimism? Like, who the hell cares if I'm optimistic or not, if I feel like things are all going to work out okay or not? I don't know if you've heard the expression, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's really about mindset. And so if we think we can, if we think it's all going to work out, if we think that we can pull together and get this thing done, we're right. We are going to, in fact, be able to make that happen. If we don't believe it, we're not gonna make it manifest. And so this is as important for us as individuals as it is for us in organizations. And then staying curious and being open. So when we're managing conflict, I mean, these are the keys. These are the keys to the kingdom of managing conflict. We want to stay curious about what could your perspective be? If I'm listening, if I'm managing myself well, if I am going through the steps to understand what happened in this situation, what's your perspective? What's my perspective? I'm staying curious. I'm holding you as not a fixed entity, but as a person in process. I'm using my words well, I'm breathing, and I'm staying out of my amygdala. Then what we're going to get to is an opportunity for cooperation, an opportunity for coming together, an opportunity for actually building trust out of where it is broken. We all know in those relationships with those that we hold most dear, we break and create trust all the time, which actually makes the relationship stronger, which is why this idea around conflict as necessarily a negative thing, I would like to dispel, because it is through the conflict, it is through the challenges, it is through the tough times and working through it together well that we actually get stronger and that our team gets stronger. And so if you would like to connect with me, I would love to connect with you. Here's how you can find me. I also, as Elena mentioned, have a podcast called The Cost of Not Paying Attention, where we talk about all these kinds of things. I want to leave you with one last thing today, which is connected very much to this idea of whether we think we can or we think we can't, we're right. Where we put our energy, where we put our focus matters. And I love this quote by Viktor Frankl. And any of you who are not familiar with him, he is a Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a book when he was in a concentration camp. And this is one of the quotes from that book. And he talks about that between something happening and us doing something, there is a space. It's not a very big space, it's a little space. Something happens and we react, but there is a space in there. And it is in that space where we can decide to be curious, where we can decide, I'm going to breathe, where we can decide, you have a different perspective from me. Isn't that interesting? As opposed to, how dare you have a different perspective from me? And so it's in that space where we get to choose our response. And it is in that space then where our opportunity for growth lies and our freedom. Thanks. Any questions? We've got about 10 minutes before 1 o'clock. I wanted to try and leave a little space if there were any questions that anybody had. So I'm going to stop sharing and bring us all back over here. No, I hit it. I answered all of your questions about managing conflict. Yay for me.
I'm going to kick us off with I have a few questions. I'll start with
Awesome.
one while people are thinking about it. So first of all, I mean, just brilliant reminder about the importance of emotional intelligence. And I agree with you on the emotional part of changing that at some point. But I'm curious also, you know, how much of it is social skills like that, you know, and how do you get that? So it's like, yeah, in theory, we understand like, okay, you need to be better at this, but reality is it's through practice. So do you like, you know, consciously go search for conflict and like I'm going to practice this, or how much of it is the ability to have the social skills and to be able to read the room, as they say, right? To kind of be able to listen for what people are not saying. Like any tips of how we can increase that, or just what you think about those?
Awesome. Thank you, Elena. So the great thing about emotional intelligence, which if Elena and I could, we would rename it, but as it is now called, is that our emotional intelligence can change and develop. So unlike our IQ, like your IQ is your IQ. Mostly you can read all the books, you can read every book that's back here and all the books in the Library of Congress. Your IQ is going to be your IQ. Your EQ, your emotional quotient, will change and develop with work and attention, which is why there is now this focus on it, especially in the world of work, because we can actually do something about it. And so you can take an assessment. There's all kinds of assessments out there. I give assessments that are in depth, therefore they cost some money, but there's some free assessments out there. You can get a sense of how you're doing in these skills, and then what are the arenas where you could really use some skill building. And so if you can use some skill building in developing empathy, so then, okay, what is empathy? What's the difference between empathy and sympathy? And, you know, fast shorthand is, oh, I'm so sorry for that over there for you. That must be terrible. As opposed to, I feel that with you. I am in this with you. It may also be, I've been there too. And I know how that is. You may be able, if you're a person who can sense this kind of thing, I could feel something very different in my body when I was, oh, so sorry about that over there. Like I am not emotionally invested in that's happening to you over there. Bummer, dude. Versus me really feeling that with you. Feeling with you is empathy. Sorry for you over there is sympathy. And so when we figure out where are the places where I can use some professional development and growth, then you can look, there's all kinds of resources. Go to the Google, there's books on this, there are workshops you can take, there's, you know, videos on YouTube where you can learn about these different skills. But a lot of it is, you know, it's the difference between, again, words that I would change if I could, soft skills and hard skills. And, you know, hard skills are, what are the technical things that you need to do to be able to do your job? You may need to be an engineer. You may need to know coding. You may need to know how to operate on somebody's brain, you know, whatever the hard skills are. And then there's the people stuff. And I have a book that's forthcoming called Why Are the Soft Skills So Damn Hard? Because that's actually the harder stuff, you know, that's a lifelong journey to really get great with people and with ourselves.
By the way, guys, if somebody's interested in the AQ assessments and some of what Janine was talking about, we do have some at Horizon that we can offer to you guys. So the Breviture cohort took it, and they know they validated themselves. So let me know if you guys are interested in that. And one more question for me, while people are coming up with questions, hopefully, is sometimes there are situations where you're in a conflict, and if you don't have experience in conflict, you might not be ready to kind of have that conversation. So maybe, like, instead of losing the conflict, if you want to call it that, is it okay to just be like, you know, can we continue this conversation? Or let's say the person on the other side is just getting like super defensive, and you're just not ready to face that and to have that. Like, what's the way out but not out? Maybe postponing that.
Yeah.
Or
And you know, when we think back to the little kid's hand, I think it was number 4 was ask for help, and number 5 was, you know, something like take your time or calm down, or you know. So if you're not great at this, which is perfectly normal, if you're still working on developing your skills in this arena and there's somebody else who's better, get a mediator, like pull in somebody else to help. And if you find that you yourself or the person with whom you're in conflict are just really activated, you've just gotten really pissed off, you're trying to breathe, you're trying to use all the tools, and you just can't de-escalate. Yeah, it's totally fine. And it's really helpful. Like, if you're noticing they can't calm down, put it on yourself. Say, I'm noticing I'm having a hard time breathing and thinking my way through this conversation. Would it be okay if we took a break and if we came back to this tomorrow or in a couple of hours? You know, what you don't say is, can we come back to it later? That means it's not ever going to happen. You want to put a time frame on it. You know, can we come back to it on, it's Friday afternoon at 3, you know, can we come back to it Monday afternoon? Do you have time for us to get into this a little bit and pull it apart? And by that point, I think I will have had enough of an opportunity to calm down, because then you're not, you know, obviously they're in this heightened state. The last thing you want to do is say, well, dude, I can tell you're just really activated by this. You're not going to be able to calm down. Like, that's just throwing acid on the fire. You want to put it on yourself. I'm realizing I'm having a hard time calming down, and then take that space. And you may need to calm down too. And it's always fine to ask for help.
Thank you. I know some of you guys might have to hop off, and Jeannie, we don't want to take much of your time, but does anybody have any questions? Anybody?
Yeah,
come up with
Nelson
some
has a
questions? Nelson,
question.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for the brilliant presentation. It was very, very, very enriching. So I would like to know, how can you be assertive without being aggressive, like in the conflict?
That is such a good question. And I think it's especially important today. And it can be especially tricky for women. And I love it that you're a man who is asking this question. I mean, being assertive is about standing in your own power. Being aggressive is about forcing your power on somebody else. And so I can have a strong position. I can have a strong point of view. Obviously, as you've heard today, I almost said this afternoon, I have some strong opinions about some things. And I am not being aggressive about it. I am not forcing it on you. Essentially, I am saying, here's my perspective. Here are my thoughts about this. If they're helpful, please use them. Anything that's not helpful, please throw it away. And so it's about, really, it's about how we are being ourselves. Am I trying to get you on my side? Am I trying to pull you to me? Or am I being strong in my own power and position? Somebody also asked, how would you deal with somebody who feels like they're justified in snapping at you because it got the results that they wanted? So, you know, it's back to this first one. It's never okay to hurt anybody else. We can snap. Us humans, we can snap. Things can happen and we can have an immediate response to it. And sometimes that immediate response is not great. What we want to do, and the more that we do these things, the more other people are going to start showing up in the same way. It's I think it was the third thing in the trust in what listening does model, is that we are a good example. And so when we snap, we want to then clean it up. We want to then say, and often we can't do this in the moment because we're having a reaction. But then once we realize it, and we want to, you know, back to psychological safety, we want to create a space where it's okay if somebody else, where if I snap, somebody can go, ouch. Like, and that's really all you have to do. Ouch, dude. Like, and that can then help that person realize, oh, okay, that wasn't awesome. Or you could have in your team, in your organization, you could have a word that's different from ouch, if ouch might feel triggering, but you want to find a word that is that works. I think ouch is a good one because we don't usually have, you know, like if you pinch me, I might say ouch, but if you punch me in the face, I'm not going to say ouch. I'm going to have a bigger reaction than ouch. So ouch is a word that we use if it's not too big. And even if what you did was verbally slap me in the face, if I respond with ouch, that can be enough of a trigger to remind the other person, oh yeah, we're working on this. That wasn't great. I'm sorry. And we want, when we apologize for stuff, we want to do it again. It's just like the difference between assertive and aggressive. It's about where we're coming from. People can tell if you say, sorry, I didn't mean that. I did not mean that I was sorry. And we have also collapsed. And if you need to go, you know, I'll stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes. If you need to go, please do. And we are recording this. And so, you know, we can send it out. So if you need to go, please feel free. If you want to stick around for a few more minutes, I would love it. Where was I going? We have it that when we apologize for something, we are admitting that what we did was wrong. That's not necessarily the case. So if I say something to Elena that hurts her feelings, I can apologize for it because I'm sorry that I hurt her feelings. I may not be sorry for what I said. I may still believe that what I said was totally justifiable. So I may still be holding my position, but Elena, I'm sorry. I hurt your feelings. That was not my intent. I'm so sorry that I hurt your feelings. One of the ways that we also screw that up is we say, I'm sorry your feelings got hurt. That means that it's her fault that her feelings got hurt. That's your weakness. Sorry about that, Elena. You're just too much of a wimp that you got your feelings hurt by what I said, because what I said was totally legitimate, is how she's left feeling if I say, I'm sorry, you got your feelings hurt. I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings. Even if I still think, which I'm not going to say during my apology, but even if I still think I was totally justified in doing that. But I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. I did not mean to. I'm sorry that I said that thing. I may have meant it, but I probably didn't put it in the best way for you to hear it, for you to receive it. So I'm sorry that I said it. We can apologize for stuff in a real and authentic way that helps recreate that trust and still own, like, I think I'm totally right, but I'm going to put this back together again in a real and authentic way. And then once it's dissipated, then maybe we're actually going to have a conversation about it, because it may be that I really had a point that I did not express well. So I'm going to try again, and I'm going to check in with you. Like, okay, last time I tried this, I really blew it. So I'm going to try again. Are you okay if I try again about this thing? Like, you want their partnership in it. Any more questions? All right, you guys. Well, this has been, you are very welcome. It has been my honor. I am happy to be here with you guys. I hope that this was enlightening and maybe a little bit enlivening, you know, talking about things like conflict, like, really, could I poke my eye out instead? But like when we sort of break it down, it doesn't have to be heavy. It's like when we're talking about diversity, like, oh God, really? We're going to talk about diversity? Like it doesn't, many of these things doesn't have to be hard. We make it hard. We make a determination in our brain that it's hard. And then we're right. It's going to be hard. We can hold it, that it doesn't, this is going to be okay. We're just going to have a conversation. We're going to work our way through this. There are no tigers. Thanks, you guys. I've
Thank you,
appreciated the
Janine.
nods.
Thanks, Janine.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for attending. Janine, really thank you from all of us. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Happy Friday.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.